Pat and his brother Kevin enlisted together and served together in the elite Army Rangers. Their platoon mates remember them as inseparable.
They were the closest set of brothers I think I've ever seen.
Pat had joined the Army because he wanted to fight in Afghanistan to hunt for Osama bin Laden. But shortly after he completed Ranger School in 2003, the United States invaded Iraq.
Pat was extremely upset about this. He thought the war was illegal. He thought it was a mistake. He thought it was going to be a disaster. And you don't in the Army. You're not supposed to talk about that. You're not supposed to talk politics. And Pat didn't shut up. He told everyone who he encountered, this war is illegal as hell.
As it turned out, Pat's first mission was in Iraq, not Afghanistan.
If Kevin and I are part of a situation where we must fight, every bit of my soul knows we will fight as hard as anyone ever has. We will not question the reasons for our being here or allow any personal beliefs to interfere with our job. My hope is that decisions are being made with the same good faith that Kevin and I aim to display. I hope this war is about more than oil, money, and power. I doubt that it is.
Do you think later on he thought this is about oil?
Oh, there's no doubt. The more time the more time Pat spent in Iraq, the more and more he realized this whole thing was terrible.
But Pat Tillman was the most famous soldier in the Army at that time and very important to a Pentagon trying to maintain public support for the war.
Donald Rumsfeld was a guy who happened to notice when Pat enlisted. He sent him a personal letter and tried really hard to turn him into the poster boy. He was watching Tillman's every move from the moment he enlisted throughout they knew, when Pat Tillman coughed, they knew it.
Yet Pat shunned the limelight and refused to do any interviews once he joined the Army.
He didn't want any special treatment. He was content just being like everybody else. He didn't want to be glorified or put up on a pedestal. He just wanted to do what he believed in.
He was really smart about politics, and he knew that there was a really good chance that if he died, that administration would try to capitalize on it for their benefit, and he didn't want that to happen.
Pat's first mission turned out to be a high-profile rescue.
Pat and Kevin Tillman were part of the rescue for Jessica Lynch. They were involved in that. And as the Army was sending, 1,000 troops, they're organizing this incredible number of people to rescue her, Pat looked around and said, wait a minute, something's fishy here.
One day before her rescue, Pat expressed in his journal suspicions about the operation. He questioned why so many special forces were involved in it.
This mission will be a POW rescue, a woman named Jessica Lynch. I do believe this to be a big public relations stunt. Do not mistake me. I wish everyone in trouble to be rescued, but sending this many folks in for a single low-ranking soldier screams of media blitz. In any case, I'm glad to be able to do my part, and I hope we bring her home safe.
Of course, it turned out he was right. The operation had been a publicity stunt. Lynch was being treated at an Iraqi hospital, and her doctors had tried to turn her over to the Army in the days before the raid. Tillman feared that if something were to happen to him, he too would be used as propaganda, and he shared this with some of his platoon mates.
One night, Pat, kind of out of the blue, said, if I get killed over here, don't let them parade me to the street. That's something I hate to think about. I'm afraid if I die, they're going to make me into this symbol and they're going to parade me through the street. Don't let that happen.
But by the spring of 2004, Pat was on his way to Afghanistan and on his way to die. By April 2004, Pat Tillman was finally in Afghanistan. It was where he wanted to be.
He'd become much more disillusioned about the Army by what he'd seen in Iraq. But he was going to fulfill his commitment, and he was looking forward to going to Afghanistan.
On April 22, 2004, while on mission in the mountains of Afghanistan near the Pakistan border, a Humvee broke down, and the platoon was ordered to split into two groups. Pat went with one, and his brother went with the other.
It's really sad. It's this tragic cascade of decisions. Pat was killed by friendly fire. Everyone else was told, don't tell Kevin. He was kept in the dark for a month.
The military told Pat's family he was killed by the Taliban. The Tillmans did not learn the truth until 5 weeks later.
I think it's wrong. I mean, you don't tell somebody a story that didn't happen. to try and make him feel better. There's not a whole lot that's going to make him feel better at the time. You might as well just tell him the truth.
Pat's brother Kevin later went before Congress to talk about it.
Revealing that Pat's death was a fratricide would have been yet another political disaster, so the facts needed to be suppressed. An alternative narrative had to be constructed.
Krakauer's book reveals new information about Tillman's death, known until now only to the Army and his family. This video, never before aired, was taken by Army investigators in 2006. It shows the spot where Pat Tillman was killed.
Tillman was in the season location here.
Behind these boulders, where he was hiding from a rain of bullets.
What shocked you by that investigation?
No one's asking the right questions. They're not asking any questions. There's nothing. They just drive through the canyon. We're done now. Cut.
They began at the north end of the valley.
You think when those read this book of yours, especially within the military, and certainly within the administration under President Bush, do you think they'll be able to say you've got the wrong story?
I think they'll raise objections. They certainly will. I mean, it's not a flattering portrait of Rumsfeld, Cheney especially. Some very senior members of the officer corps, generals, we're talking four-star generals, did not do the right thing with Pat Tillman. They did the wrong thing.
The general now running the entire operation in Afghanistan now, General McChrystal, you in your book talk about his role in all of this.
McChrystal is extremely quiet. He covers his tracks, he avoids publicity, but we do know that McChrystal was notified probably the night Pat was killed and certainly the next day.
We interviewed McChrystal in Afghanistan this past July. We asked him to answer a few questions about Tillman. He refused. Former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld also refused to be interviewed for this story.
Many American families have suffered the same terrible sacrifice that the Tillman family now suffers.
In a standard Army deployment form Pat filled out before he left for Iraq, he made it very clear he did not want the military to have any direct involvement with his funeral. Nevertheless, the military did.
If he was here right now and find out what happened, what do you think he would feel about the way that his funerals were treated?
He would be so angry. He would be so hurt and furious at what his families had to suffer at the hands of the Army and the government. I mean, you know, he would want to come down and wring someone's neck, for sure.
For Nightline, I'm Bob Woodruff in New York.
So you didn't know, or did you remember that actually Pat Tillman was involved in the rescue of Jessica Lynch? And so wasn't his brother, Kevin. And it wasn't this, you know, guys sliding down on ropes like they supposedly got Osama bin Laden recently. How convenient when the old man's poles were so low. He's the Osama, he got the bad guy that Bush couldn't get. Yabba, yabba, yabba. Ho, ho, ho. Tough men. Yeah, so once again, a staged event to keep you bought into the we protect our troops. We care about our troops. That's why they were cutting the benefits back. We care about our troops. That's why we put them on drugs when they get back here. We care about our troops. Yeah, do you even know where Ramstein Air Force Base is in the hospital? I'll tell you about caring for the troops. What was the first thing they were going to do when Obama got in? That was cut back their med benefits. We care about the troops as they're on their 4th and 5th deployment. It's called stop loss because we care about the troops. This whole lie, the war on terror, based on whose terror? This media that sells you these lies. Boy, what would real men do if they found out? So anyway, here's a little piece. This is Pat Tillman murdered. Yeah, find out if, my gosh, he was murdered by his own troops. What a hero, huh, sports fans?
General Clark, let me turn from this story. We expected to spend all of our time with you tonight talking about this, but there have been two developments in the Pat Tillman story, a fiasco. There's no other word for it now. And this awful report tonight, parsing through these documents obtained by the Associated Press that indicate that Army investigators were denied permission to see whether or not Pat Tillman's death in Afghanistan as an Army Ranger was a deliberate fragging, was a case of murder, even though the shots were seemingly so close together in his head that they looked to the doctors on the scene that they might have been fired from only 10 yards away. Not only was there access denied here, but the Army lawyers were congratulating themselves in email traffic from keeping this from becoming a criminal investigation. Do you think this case is still wide open?
Absolutely, and it should be. The evidence of some problems is very, very clear. Mary Tillman and the Tillman family have been incredibly courageous in pursuing the truth in this, and the truth is not yet out. If there's even a hint that there was something like a homicide or a murder in this case, it should have been fully investigated and proved or disproved. And we don't really know how far up. Was it the Secretary of Defense's office? Was it the White House? Where did the idea that you shouldn't give any indication of what happened to Tillman, just go ahead and go through with the burial ceremony, give him the Silver Star, where was that idea blessed? You can be sure that that idea did not originate or stop at the 2 or 3 star level. That was, someone approved that all the way to the top because Pat Tillman was a political symbol used by the administration when it suited their purposes.
Well, we have assumed from the beginning that that was exactly the scenario, that this possibility that his death from friendly fire would somehow affect, in some way that neither of us has ever been able to understand, somehow affect people's appreciation for his patriotism and sacrifice. Does it not begin to look more and more like that we're going the wrong direction in this? That they were not trying to protect something slightly negative from coming out, but in fact protecting the accusation that his mother has made and has not gotten a lot of attention to, that perhaps he was indeed murdered. Were we actually underestimating what was being covered up here?
It's very possible. We just don't know, Keith. I think the responsible thing for the Pentagon to do and for the Congress to do is to demand that the investigation be reopened and people all the way up the chain of command to the very top discuss what happened, when, why. We get to the facts about why the murder charge wasn't fully investigated. I looked at some of the investigations. I looked at the tape. I looked at the rerun of the scene. I met with the Tillman family. And honestly, the distance, even the investigators said that the shots were fired at less than 100 meters. And okay, the light was failing, but he had a clearly recognizable silhouette. His weapon was clearly visible, the type of weapon. It's really hard for people to understand this. The investigation needs to be reopened and followed through to its conclusion. As opposed to the ruling today that a 3-star general is likely to be demoted and other officers will be admonished, and that's it so far. General Wesley Clark, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO in Europe, our great thanks as always for being with us, sir. Thank you, Keith.
That's the way we take care of our hero sports fans. Yet we kept pushing for that war, didn't we? Yeah. By the way, is the pipeline going through? Isn't that the one they negotiated in Waco, Texas in 2000? You sports fans, because you care about history, huh? Okay, so anyway, how they lied when Pat Tillman went. This is, you're going to find out what? That Jessica Lynch will even tell you, hey, I wasn't the Rambo girl. That they weren't, anyway. Try some truth. See how it tastes. Truth tastes pretty funny, huh? Sometimes it's bitter. So yeah, you've been a decade killing, 1 million Iraqis. Is that a Holocaust, sports fans? Do we have to get to 2 million sports fans? How many Afghanis do we have to kill, sports fans? How many Libyans do we have to humanitarianly kill, sports fans? Yet sports are so important. Why don't we spend hours and weeks and days debating whether or not we got player X or player Y while they kill millions of people, and do it with your name, your sports fan name, with your money. They'll deficit spend until you're bankrupt, but you better cheer for those Patriots, otherwise you're not part of the Red Sox nation, huh? Pretty sad. I say this because, once again, Pat Tillman, here's a great American who was sold a lie, bought the lie, found out it was a lie, and when he wrote to his family saying, I'm going to come home and I'm going to, stand up against the war, that's when he had to die. Now, when they start killing people that tell the truth, and they start making you travel like this, sports fans, how's the airport treating you? And they have to squeeze your children's genitals, sports fans, when are you going to change the sport? That's my question for the real men out there. Okay, so anyway, here's a little quick one. This is Alex Jones on Pat Tillman.
Of mainstream media articles in the last few weeks admitting that the CIA is protecting, with our military forces, the opium fields, the poppy fields of Afghanistan.